Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm super excited today to bring you our next guest on the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. That's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome a wonderful lady who I've known for a little while.
Little while.
Her name is Kellie Burns, and we're just having a chat before. We were in the same class in year 4 and year 5.
Yes.
Back in school. So we're showing our age a little. We've actually known each other 47 years.
Wow. What a great year that was, though. Dubbo South Primary School. Perfect.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And, you know, being brought up in the country was a wonderful experience. And there were so many positive things about that have made us who we are. So
I agree. Yep.
Yeah. So
I totally agree. It teaches you a lot about community, and it teaches you a lot about being very real as humans, interestingly enough, and things that I think we've all carried through into our adult lives. And so many successful people came out of that cohort. It amazes me. We've all gone our different directions, but so many successful people, which is great.
Definitely. And Kellie hasn't come back into my world. This is the first time we've spoken. We've been friends again and reconnected on social media for the last, I don't know, probably 8 years or something.
Yes, sounds about right. Yes.
Yeah. So it's just delightful to have her here today. So let me introduce Kellie to you. Kellie is a very successful real estate agent and business owner who no longer lives in Dubbo. She's in the Sydney metropolitan area and a mum of 2 young adults. She completed a diploma of counselling, a certificate 3 in fitness, and a certificate 4 in nutrition, just to broaden all her wealth of knowledge that was already there, and all mainly for the purposes of self-development and understanding. She has a special interest in the connection between physical and emotional health and well-being, and the power of nutrition and movement to heal. So welcome, Kellie. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Nat. Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. And as I said, done some recent reading on all your amazing achievements since we left Dubbo, and I'm very, very proud to be reconnecting with you and being associated with you, to be honest. It's a real honour.
Oh, thank you. That makes my heart very full. and even though we've gone in different directions and gone and experienced our own things in life, it's amazing that reconnecting really brings us back to that grounded upbringing and that foundation that really have made us who we are. So
I agree.
Yeah, I'd love for you to just give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do in the world.
Yes, so as you touched on, I've been a real estate agent for most of my adult life. Like a lot of real estate agents, you sort of fall into it because you sort of like houses and people think you're a people person and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of what I've been doing over a very long period of time. I think what defines me now more so, though, is my work around physical health and emotional health. I still run the business. I still list and sell houses, but I have a real side interest in my own emotional well-being. I've had mental health challenges. On reflection, I've had mental health challenges my whole life. I just didn't know that's what it was. I was first diagnosed with postnatal depression when my son Zach was born, so that's 23 years ago, and then was medicated through that period. I had a psychologist at the time say to me, you need to start exercising because exercise will help you feel better, serotonin, dopamine, all the stuff that comes with exercise. I had my daughter 12 months later, and I'd strap these two little babies into the pram and I'd walk for hours. And I got hooked on the feelings that exercise gave me. And it was such a large part of my recovery at that stage in terms of my mental health. Fast forward to 12 years ago, and my younger brother, Sean, who you knew in school as well, took his own life in a really shocking, tragic event that nobody kind of totally saw coming. Yeah. And that reignited my interest in mental health and interest in trying to normalise mental health, trying to make it okay for people to say, you know what, I'm actually really fucking struggling right now. Where do I go for help? And a realisation that the system is quite complex and it's not welcoming in terms of what's the quickest and easiest way to get help, which is certainly what he found, not through lack of quality professionals like yourselves, but the avenues of getting help were not and remain not very simple or straightforward for people to get help. So that's the background. I do understand the power of exercise and the power of what we eat to make ourselves feel better. And I'm so passionate about that. Anyone that knows me and works with me and my family, I'm a little bit cultish in that respect in terms of my kids saying, I'm feeling pretty bad today. And go, how much water have you drunk? Have you gone out for a walk? What did you eat? And I kind of try and break it down. But they're my special areas of interest. And I really do, I'm passionate about breaking down the stigma around mental health and around managing trauma and all the fallout that comes with traumatic events in our lives. And it's a journey, a personal journey for myself, but also I wanted to become the best mother I could become, right? Because motherhood and parenthood has a whole other set of responsibilities. And I wanted to break some generational cycles, I think, around some mental health stuff that I now, on reflection, realise it's probably been there over a few generations. And there's all this research about epigenetics now, right, in terms of the trauma that gets carried through. Yeah. So I'm on a bit of a crusade to break some cycles around that as well. So yeah, that was meant to be a short little version, but anyway, I've gone off and I've given you it all.
I love it. And, come from Dubbo, there's often not short versions. It's
there
okay.
Isn't.
It's all part of who we are.
We're passionate about. No.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm very grateful that you've started with that and been so upfront because we know that these things that are often not spoken about and that are taboo, someone needs to take a stand. Yeah. Someone needs to speak up because it's not okay. You touched on the mental health system and, this is not a bagging the mental health system, but it's a very broken system.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that are really, more and more people are suffering and experiencing mental health issues, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, and we don't have the amount of people in place to assist them.
No.
And it's about time that we stand up, stand tall and be a tall poppy and speak up and no longer be afraid to take a stand for what we believe in.
No, and look, and I agree. And there were occasions when my brother put his hand up and said, Kellie, I really need help. I need to see somebody. And it just, you've got to go to the GP, you've got to get the mental health plan, then you've got to try and get into a psychologist, which could take another 6 weeks. And by the time that's happened, a lot of people sort of dig themselves out a little bit temporarily. And they go, no, I'm okay now. I don't need to see anybody. So the cycle begins again. And it isn't a straightforward system, and that is no reflection on the quality or the caliber of the people working within the system. It's the system itself. And what I've realised is it's not one size fits all either. You might click with a psychologist, you may not. That might not be the right person for you. So it might take a few goes to get the right one. And I've seen different psychologists at different stages throughout my own life. And that served that purpose at that time, and then I would finish that relationship and have a few years break. I'm actually about to start again with another new one, which we can chat about for different reasons. And I feel like I believe to my children and to my family and to people I know, I have normalized psychologists. You know, both my kids quite readily put their hand up at different times and listen, I think I might need to go and see somebody. Fine.
Yes.
But we have the financial resources to do that, right? But if you don't, I hate to think, honestly, what it would be like to be in that situation where you are trapped within your own head. You don't know the answers. You don't know who to reach out to. And it just exacerbates that sense of isolation, I would imagine. And it saddens me greatly. And we need to do something about changing the system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really, there's so many systems, no matter what it is. You know, we're hearing more about the hospital systems, healthcare systems, the Medicare system. There's so many challenges within systems, and they have their own layers of trauma and helplessness blended in there. So it's one of the things that I'm very passionate about is bringing this podcast to life and getting word out there so that, you know, if you can't get in, this is not a treatment by any way, in any way, shape or form. However, it's about, while you can't get in and get some assistance, let's listen to anything we can, take little snippets of help that might make a difference and find some avenues of how to get help.
And conversations, right? Like, because I'm quite open. Since Sean died, I've been quite open about my own, you know, journey with mental health. I've done community presentations for the Black Dog Institute where I stand up full of room of strangers and tell them about my own journey and my own diagnoses of different things over the years. And it's fascinating the people that then come up to you after those presentations or will message me on social media after and saying, thank you. You know, you made me feel safe enough to share how I was feeling to my husband or to my wife or whatever. And that it is just, it could all just start with a conversation. And I am by no means a qualified psychologist. I just try and be as human as I can and try and be vulnerable. And vulnerability is a superpower. If you can honestly sit with another human and say, and honestly and truly connect on that level, it is healing. It's part of the healing. And that is what a good psychologist or a good counsellor does. But we can do that to anybody. We can do that to our friends and our children and our husband and our daughter. And it starts with being vulnerable. It really is. That's the start.
Agree. You know, vulnerability, when we were growing up and certainly generations before us, was often seen as a weakness, but we now know it's so much different. It's a massive strength. And I love the word you use, that it's a superpower.
It gives you a level of human connection that you cannot be achieved in any other way. And that's one of the things I've definitely learned as a result of my traumas over the years. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you know,
I've got a question for you. Bit of a sideway, and I define trauma, because what I've struggled with over the years is, you know, my brother was diagnosed with PTSD and it had a label on it. And for a long time, psychologists would say to me, you've had traumas over many decades, and I didn't feel comfortable owning that word. I didn't feel like I'd earned that word. Whereas my brother he'd gone in, he'd been a policeman, he'd seen some horrific stuff, like classic PTSD, if you like. And whereas me, I'm like, no, I don't know about trauma. Is it trauma? And now I've kind of made peace with that and gone, yeah, well, it is. I've got a few decades of stuff that would be defined as trauma, but I'm curious how you, as the expert, would define what trauma is.
What a great question. And I don't think there's a simple answer because, you know, long-term, historically, people have exactly what you've said. Trauma is witnessing something major, something catastrophic, a terrible event, something dreadful's happened to us or we witnessed it. And that's what people assumed was trauma. But what we know, there are so many things, and often you'll hear them referred to these days as little t traumas and big T traumas. Trauma is something that is outside our ability to cope at the time. Something that happens, and we all bring our own experiences and life experiences, and as you've already referred to, epigenetics with us, whether we believe in that or we don't. We have generations of behaviors and ways of handling things that are passed on and passed on and passed on, often and certainly not deliberately. I believe everyone does the best they can with the resources available to them.
100%. Yep.
And when we are faced with something and we've had no experience of trauma and don't know how to handle it, if we feel overwhelmed by that, then that could be a trauma. But for someone who's been through something significant, they might look at that and go, oh, that's not a trauma.
Interesting.
Trauma.
Yeah. So it's subjective.
The perspective we bring based around the experiences we have. And if you feel that it's outside the realms of what you can cope with, then it's an overload of stress. It could be something that might lead you down the path of trauma or overwhelm. And if it doesn't dissipate within 4 weeks, as a psychologist you use is in the phase, and after 4 weeks, if you're still struggling, you might be having trouble sleeping, can't get that whatever has happened out of your head, then it's time to go and ask for some help from a qualified professional, or like you said, stick your hand up and say to a friend or a family member that you trust, something isn't right, something just doesn't feel right, and they can assist you to talk it through and normalize the process. Because years ago, there's a manual that we refer to as treating professionals, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is mental health diagnoses. And the way and this will be very controversial because I have very strong beliefs and opinions about this. Maybe I shouldn't share them.
Hit me.
But one thing in the prior version of the DSM was that if there had ever been a threat to your sense of identity and your perception of who you were, and that was questioned, and a threat to you as a person in that way, then that could be a diagnosed trauma.
Interesting.
But
That's
then
interesting.
they, in their wisdom, decided, that didn't
count.
However, from my own perspective, one of my strongest values is honesty and integrity. And if something has happened to me and I feel that my integrity has been called to account, then I feel very offended by that and impacted by that. So I still very much believe that if your integrity and identity has been brought into question through an event outside of you, I do believe that does still constitute a trauma response of sorts, even though it may no longer be identified as a trauma.
Isn't that interesting? And I think I've felt over the years that labels and diagnoses, while helpful, and I'm the sort of person, those that know me well will laugh because it's so true. I'm a control freak, right? Which is a consequence of generalized anxiety and that sort of stuff. I like being able to control as much as possible. And part of that control comes with, I want a doctor or a physio or a chiro to tell me exactly what's going on, and then I can Google that shit and I will implement the remedy like no one's ever implemented it before, and I'm going to make myself better. What I've had to accept over the years is that just doesn't work that way. There are some things that you just have to accept, and sometimes a diagnosis and a label can be quite limiting in terms of how you approach healing, right? And so much of it overlaps, and that's, I guess, the system needs its labels, as you just referred to, for lots of reasons. But I think as an individual, if you then think of yourself in terms of, I have anxiety or I have depression or whatever, it becomes part of your narrative and part of your story. And sometimes that can become a roadblock in lots of ways, I think.
I completely agree. I think while set up to be helpful, sometimes they can absolutely be harmful because
Mm,
people, because of the label they're given and often how they're treated because of it, and
yeah,
what they then take on board, which was never theirs to take on, that
yeah,
they take on responsibility of that, that becomes their identity. And
yeah,
exactly as you said, you
yeah,
limit yourself by that.
yeah, yeah. And
So
it's interesting you talk about identity. When we first started talking about doing this podcast, I was quite smug about the fact post-traumatic growth and I'm really good and that sort of stuff. But in the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've had a fairly major back injury present itself, and I'm facing the prospect of potentially a pretty major back surgery. And you talk about challenging identity, and I'm pride myself on being strong physically and fit and all that sort of stuff. And it's really shaken, it's rocked the tree a little bit, and it's reminded me that you are never fully healed from stuff. It's kind of really stripped me bare all over again. And I'm really fortunate. I've got an incredible chiropractor who's a little bit woohoo. And his thing is like, when you feel the pain, what meaning do you give it? What story do you tell yourself when you feel this pain?
yeah.
What do you mean? Well, it fucking hurts. Like, what do you mean? What story do I give? He said, but
It
what
does.
dug deep enough, what story that came with that for me was, I'm old, I'm broken, I'm going to have another surgery, I'm going to be out of action. What effects that going to have on my mental health? I can't exercise, and it was a spiral. It was a genuine spiral. And he then referred me to what's known as a neuropsychologist, which is something I didn't even know existed, who specialise in the connection between mind and body, which has always been something I've been interested in anyway. So we're starting to do some work around that, and why I keep having these injuries to my posterior chain, and perhaps what that might represent, and working through some traumas that I probably hadn't quite dealt with yet around being safe in my body and my sense of safety and feeling fearful and all this stuff. So it reminded me that we're never done, right? We're never, as humans, we are presented with opportunities / obstacles every day to either move forward and see them as learning opportunities, or to go, well, woe is me, why does this shit keep happening to me? And that, yeah, it's been an interesting 5 or 6 weeks, and it's quite timely that all this has come together. And what I've realised is that both emotional and physical pain has a purpose.
Yes.
And whilst I realise I can probably handle emotional pain better than physical pain, funnily enough, being medicated and all those sorts of things, that's important. But the process of medication is to keep you functioning enough to then do the work.
Yes.
Both in an emotional sense and a physical sense. So you ease off your pain, so you can do some rehab, but the same goes with, being medicated for anxiety, depression. You still then need to do the work. And I'm starting to do some more work all over again, just when I thought I had all my shit together. Well,
and
apparently
isn't it
not.
funny that that's exactly what happens? It's almost, I liken it, when we all heard about it and you go, oh yeah, whatever, here she goes again, talking about the layers of the onion. But the reality is we peel off a layer.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of learnings in there, and we have to do the work. It doesn't get handed to us on a platter, and we don't suddenly miraculously heal. You've done shitloads of work. I've done the same. We do that and we keep going. It's not a linear process. And then a layer comes off, and you sit with that for a while and you process it and you do that. And then when you're ready, I believe, I think it's only when we're ready, the next thing can show itself. But
Isn't that interesting?
One thing
I
that
agree.
stands out for me when you were talking about that was the body always keeps the score.
Yeah, what a brilliant book. But
It's a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And when we have trauma, we can do all the emotional release work, all the physiological stuff. We can do everything to work through that. Who are we now? What are we doing to heal ourselves? But the body will keep it somewhere within its memory network. So I'm so pleased that you're working in with a neuropsychologist and a good chiropractor who's a bit woo-woo that can help you work on that, because once you get that physiological relief, some of that other stuff will heal as well. So I've
It's been
actually,
quite fascinating, honestly. And the power of your nervous system, right? And I'm one of those people that's into ice baths and all that crazy shit that people do. But and somatic healing and all that stuff that is within me. And what I realized is I'd probably over the years almost disassociated and shut down different parts of my physiology, which were linked to past traumas. And yeah, it's a relatively new area, right, in terms of psychology,
yes.
and it's not.
Yeah.
And it is considered woohoo, but I know there is some emerging evidence about the power of that connection, right?
Definitely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're going to love one of the guests I'm going to have on, hopefully in the next few weeks. I've
Yep.
started learning a thing called TRE. It's trauma release exercises that
Oh,
help
wow.
induce neurogenic tremors so the body lets out stored
Oh,
trauma. So
oh boy.
I'll
Oh
link you
boy.
in with some of
Oh
that,
boy.
but I'll after the call I'll connect with you about it.
Please do.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. And one of the ladies who's doing all the certification training here in Australia has agreed to come on as a guest, and she is phenomenal
That's
at the
amazing.
work they're doing. So yeah, that's really exciting, and a
Yeah.
lot of the newer stuff coming through to release stored trauma. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited about that.
That's wonderful. I look forward to hearing all about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes.
let's have a look then. Let's go, if you're up for it, a little bit deeper. I remember little blonde-haired Sean.
Mm.
We'd see him as little
Yeah.
kids, and
Yeah.
he was such a sweet, innocent soul. He was a
Yes.
beautiful boy, a
Yeah.
little bit younger than us, obviously.
Yeah. 4 years younger. Yeah. 4 or
Yeah,
5 years younger than us. Yeah.
yeah. And I know he went on and he did some amazing things. You alluded to the fact that he was a police officer,
Mm.
and I know he was married and had a couple of beautiful kids. So
Yes.
tell me a bit more around that as being your main. Obviously, there were other traumas that had happened through your life, but that was the real key turning point for you.
Definitely. Yeah. So, we had shared childhood stuff, and he and I, and some would say perhaps had trauma bonded over the years. And we had both gone on to be really successful and supported each other through that, and kind of created new identities in some ways. And we really got each other. And if you've ever had that relationship with a sibling, it's unique and it's special. And I see it in my own children now, which is very, very special to me. And I could just ring him and share things with him, and vice versa, that nobody else would get. We had this shared, really dark humor that often people, if they'd heard it, would have gone, "Oh my God, that's appalling. You can't say that." But we did. That was how we coped. And he was a classic high achieving individual, like type A, and in hindsight, could have been a suggestion that, ADHD or, I don't, I reflect on all these things now of the beauty of my hindsight and thinking there are probably things that should have been picked up earlier. But anyway, he always wanted to be a policeman. As soon as he was old enough, at the age of 19, he went down to the police academy, and he excelled within that role. And his final role within the 20 odd years in the police was with the Tactical Operations Unit, which is the SWAT team within New South Wales Police. They're the team that went into the Lindt siege, for example. Like, that was the ultimate for him. That was all he ever wanted to do. Very physically fit, prided himself on mental toughness, etc., etc.
Yeah.
As it got towards the end of his police career, though, he really wanted to pursue more around physical training and fitness and strength and conditioning. So he studied the further tertiary education around strength and conditioning, got his master's in strength and conditioning, worked for some NRL teams in conjunction with his police career for a while, but ended up leaving the police and worked for the West Tigers and then Parramatta Eels when he passed away. The funny thing about when he left the cops is he told everybody that he was getting out on a knee injury, but that wasn't it. He was getting out for reasons of PTSD, but there was just so much shame around it. And it's quite sad now in hindsight, because I know so many others that were going through the same thing at the same time, but none of them really knew. They weren't able to be open enough with each other. That was why they were leaving the New South Wales Police Force. And PTSD within the police force, it's an epidemic. And
it's terrible. And the
I don't
stigma
have the
attached
answers
to it.
Yep. And I don't have the answers.
No.
I don't know what the answer is. It's a major cultural shift that needs to happen, and it's not a quick fix, but I know that the burden of carrying what they do and the things that they see, it breaks. Yeah. It breaks most of them. That's what I now realise, because I've met so many since Sean passed, and I just see the damage that it's done.
And the reality is they're all human beings too.
Yeah.
Humans are not designed to see, hear, experience what they experience. That's the bottom line. We are all human beings. And
the irony is, the type of person that becomes a cop for all the right reasons, in that they want to help people. Sean in his heart was a very, very sensitive person, and I see so much of my brother and my son now, and he had a sensitivity that he masked very, very well, but that's what drew him to the police force. But it's also, in a way, what made it very difficult for him to cope with the things that he saw. So yeah, again, I don't have the answers, because we need police, right? We need military, we need police frontline people, but I know there are so many broken people walking around right now, and the ripples effect of that in terms of divorce and damaged parenting styles and all that comes with it. And yeah, it's incredibly sad. It really is.
It is. So let's go back to, like, he'd gone through all of this, he'd done some amazing things.
Yep.
To that point where you found out, the worst day in your life.
100%. So we were all, it was January 27th, 2012. We had stayed in the city, the kids and my husband and I had stayed in the city. Sean was staying with us, was in our house, and we got a phone call from our office saying, look, the police are trying to find you. Sean hasn't turned up to work. At that stage, he's working Parramatta Eels, and they want to go into the house. And I knew straight away that he was gone. I just knew. And you sort of go into this shock. It's fascinating on reflection. You're hearing it, but you're not actually feeling it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Definitely.
Yeah, and you kind of almost disassociate. And, the kids were quite young at the time. They're about 10 or 11. And I said to Andrew, my husband, on the quiet, look, we need to leave. We need to get back to the house. So we told the kids that he'd had an accident. Uncle Sean had an accident. We just need to get home and see what's going on. We dropped the kids off somewhere else along the way. We didn't bring the kids back to the house. Good. By the time we got here, the police were here. There was police cars, there was ambulances, and they'd broken into our house and they'd found him. And I'd never had a panic attack before. And I remember sitting out the back of the house here and just shaking uncontrollably. It was like, again, that physiology thing. Yeah. My body
went into shock.
Was trying to make sense of it. Was bizarre. And like, it was January, it was warm, but I was freezing cold, and I was in shock. Yeah. And the following few days and weeks were all about funeral arrangements and practicalities and, organising insurances and all the real things, supporting his wife and his girls and all that sort of stuff, and doing and doing and doing and doing. And I now know a lot more about grief. And the real grief comes after the circus leaves town, right? Yeah, the real grief is when everyone kind of thinks, well, life goes back to normal. And fucking hell, that is not how it rolls.
Life never goes back to normal. There is no normal, is there?
No, it's a new way of being. And I tried to throw myself straight back into work. I remember on a Saturday, I had a couple of open homes lined up, and I physically could not walk into that house. I could not get myself out of the car. My body was like, you don't have the capacity for this. You do not have the bandwidth to be dealing with this right now. So I'm very fortunate to have a husband that is incredibly supportive, and he said, you just need to stay away as much as possible and as long as you need to. But even that, right, you have to find a new way of living. You have to find a way of integrating life in a new way and moving forward and giving that meaning. And I had an amazing psychologist at the time that talked me through the different stages of loss and grief and all that sort of stuff. But I, within 12 to 18 months, decided that I wanted to do some work around breaking down the stigma around mental health, because ultimately that's what killed him, his inability to ask for help and get help. And I also wanted to pay honour to his police career and to the New South Wales Police Force. So I started doing some fundraising with New South Wales Police Legacy to support police legatees, because they'd been so supportive of the girls financially when Sean passed.
Yeah.
So I turned all of that into something meaningful. And she said to me, that's a classic stage of healing from grief, in that you are turning it into something positive. It doesn't mean you're ignoring it. It just means you are turning it into something that is more powerful for you and more easy for you to carry. And that made such sense. And the selfish part of me, though, did it and continues to do it, because I don't want anyone to forget about him. He was a pretty ego-driven kind of guy, and he loved achieving, and he loved everyone knowing of his achievements.
Yep.
And I know that the fact we're still talking about him today, and I still, people message me regularly still with these crazy stories about what he achieved. The fact that goes on, it means he lives on in people's minds, and that is just so important to me, because I can't let it die. I can't let him die, if that makes sense.
He would be so proud of you.
Oh, I know.
I follow you and what you've done, and the Sean Burns Memorial, and I'm like, what a beautiful, beautiful tribute to an amazing man.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's for his girls. They were 6 and 3 when he passed, and they not had a very, very small sense of who he was. And this is a part of my gift to them, in terms of this is who he was. This is a super high achieving, very, very complex man who was an incredible father and loved them with all that he had. And that's part of that as well. That's part of my legacy and part of my tribute to him. Yeah. Yes.
So beautiful.
But that was my trauma healing, I think. It's funny, I still get flashbacks to that day, and I still get that physical feeling in my chest of that weight of that. Quite regularly, like at least once a week or so. And it might be a song, or it might be just a thought or a memory, and the pain of that loss is still there. It's still here. And it's weird. I kind of don't want it to go away, though, either, because that means his memory will have faded. It's bizarre. So I kind of hold on to the grief in some ways, and I have moments where I think I really want to wallow a little bit in it. So I'll sit at home and I'll pull out some of his old stuff that I have, and I'll put on a video of him talking or whatever, and I will just sit with that for an hour or so and just cry. And that's really healing and cathartic for me, but it also is what works for me. And I also understand, and I often wonder if in me doing that, am I not allowing myself to heal? Am I kind of stuck in it? And a psychologist tried to tell me at one stage, another label, you are suffering from complicated grief. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, you're kind of stuck in it. But I don't want to get out of it either. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that from the way you've described, that's really healthy.
Yeah, good. Good.
And, is it doing you harm?
I don't believe so. No.
Well, you've managed to pay forward so much and keep his legacy going. And, when we're long gone, your legacy will live on through that as well. So
I like to think so. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And your kids and his kids get to do that each day as well. And no doubt appreciate all that you've done.
Yeah. And again, it gets back to that breaking that generational cycles, though, and part of the reason I really work hard on my own mental health is that I do have a real fear around suicide for myself and for my own children, and the statistics show that the likelihood of suicide within families is so much higher. And whilst I've never had suicidal ideation as such, I have had moments where I have just felt so trapped that I just want my brain to stop.
Yeah.
So I've had little glimpses of it, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying to be in that headspace. So I have a responsibility to myself and to my children and to my nieces to show that you can be like that, but it's still okay. You can still find ways to be better, and that nothing is permanent. As Buddha says, nothing is permanent. And even on my worst days, I know that tomorrow is a new day, and it's only ever one good sleep or one good walk or one good gym session away from feeling better again. And I've proven that again and again and again. I know what works. I know what works to make myself feel better.
Oh, and I love that you have been comfortable enough to share that with us, as I know that many of our listeners have been through, significant traumas and adversity, and might have had fleeting moments or not so fleeting moments of suicidal ideation, and questioned who they were, why they were here, their purpose. But as you said, it doesn't have to be permanent. It's always one step away from making a different choice.
And it is a choice, isn't it? And I think, if you become self-aware enough to sense that within yourself, and you have, I have a very clear strategy of how to make myself feel better on a bad day, and it's worked again and again and again. And that is my hope for anybody that is in that headspace, is you create a strategy for yourself that will work and will just get you out of that headspace in that moment, because the next moment will be better. And that's what you have to hold on to in those moments. And because suicide, as survivors, as a family of this, I cannot explain to you the ripples of pain and the ripples that continue to run through all of us on a daily basis. I'm a hypervigilant mother. If one of my children rings at a time when I wasn't expecting them to ring, I immediately think the worst. I immediately think it takes me straight back to that day in terms of something terrible's happened, and that hypervigilance I don't think will ever go away. And I know that my sister-in-law totally understands that with her own girls as well. And it is a generational thing now that we all will manage and we'll all create awareness around, but we are all, the gift within that is they're all very, very aware of our own mental health. And we all are all very tuned into how we're feeling and how we're doing in any particular moment. And as I said, generational curses will be broken, have been broken. Which is wonderful.
Exactly, have been broken. And I think having that deep sense of self, of self-awareness, and the capacity to build a support system and ask for help when you need it. We can't underestimate the power of that. That, as you said, it is a choice, and sometimes it will feel like we can't make a choice, or there is only one choice. But they're the times where we have to dig deeper and really monitor the people around us and reach out to help them when they may not be able to make sense of things or to reach out of their own accord.
The other thing that always resonates with me is really understanding that our thoughts aren't true, and our brain has a really good knack of tricking us and hooking us on these stories that might be familiar but still not true. Our brain likes to cling to things that are consistent, right, in terms of, it tells itself again and again the same things. It doesn't make it true, though. And there's a real, I remember the actual day about 10 years ago where for the first time I actually observed my thoughts separate from my thought.
Okay.
And that might sound strange, but
no, it's great.
When you have that moment where you kind of go, hang on a second, that's not true. That's actually not true. When you create that split within your own brain function, and I know plenty of people that just do not have that they're so fused with their thoughts, and they don't have that ability to kind of separate and go and observe it from afar. When I developed that skill and that ability to challenge anything that I was thinking and sort of, what's the actual evidence for that? Hang on a second. That's a real skill. And I'm, as a parent, again, I hope I've given that to my kids as well. Just because you think it doesn't make it real, doesn't make it true, question it. Because I think that's really powerful as well.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a really powerful insight.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And can make a huge difference
Yeah.
for us. And being mindful and just being that outside observer, observing that without judging it.
True. And I've also been told over the years that I'm really good at forgiving others, not so good at forgiving myself. And
self-forgiveness is a different level.
I hold myself up to standards that I do not hold others up to. And sometimes that can be to my own detriment as well. But again, work in progress.
Absolutely. And like you've said, it's not linear. And while ever we're alive, we're on this journey. It's never done.
No.
Different layers of the onion will peel away. But with each one comes a deeper sense of understanding and another level of growth, I think.
And a deeper sense of contentment, if that makes sense, a deeper sense of being at peace with the world around us. And, you know, my husband says to me, "You're never happy. You're always striving to be better or to be more." And in some ways, that's very true. And I think that when you stop being like that, then what's the point in being alive, right? There is always so much more to learn and to explore in life. You know, we love to travel. We love doing all the crazy adventures that we do because that's what we're here for. And again, that's the gift of losing Sean, and then COVID even reinforced that even more, because I realized so clearly it can all be gone like that. So you have to live, and as you know, as you get into our age, right?
Yes, us spring chickens that are apparently now middle age.
You don't know what health challenges are going to present. So if you can take the trip, or you can do something that you've been putting off doing, like we trekked Kokoda a few years ago. We do all this stuff because you don't know what's around the corner. And again, that's the gift of trauma, I think, as well, and loss. You make every day count.
I love that. Absolutely. Make every day count. I'm going to put that on as a Kellie Burns quote.
I love it.
Absolutely. And it's true. After going through trauma or loss, it puts things into such perspective.
Yeah.
And things have so much more value.
Yeah.
In that, what is really important.
Yeah. You're right. Perspective. And I think COVID reinforced that for a lot of people as well. You know, it got down to, because to be perfectly frank, I quite enjoyed lockdown.
I loved it.
But and our business wasn't particularly affected, so we were insulated in a lot of ways from a lot of the pressures that came on others. But being at home with my children and my husband and in my house, and that was when I did my diploma of counselling. I was studying. How good's this? No one expected anything from me socially. It was perfect. So again, that was a good period for me.
Yeah, and again, that just goes to show, it's testament to you that no matter what gets thrown at you, you have this knack of taking the lessons, taking the learnings, and making the most of whatever's thrown in your path, because nothing can be as bad as what you've been through already.
You absolutely nailed it. And I look at these things, this back thing at the moment, which is really frustrating me, but I think it's nothing. It's nothing compared to what that period of my life was. And it was like a dark tunnel for about 3 or 4 years. And I don't remember a lot about it, to be honest. But you're right. When you go through trauma, it can't get any worse than that period, especially when you've come through the other side. And that, you're right. Nothing can hurt as much as that did.
Yeah. But yes, in the moment it can feel awful. Absolutely. But once we're a little bit further apart and distant from it, we get that sense of perspective come back in. Kel, what would you say? Do you think there's any specific qualities or personal attributes that you see as being key for moving through trauma and into post-traumatic growth?
The most important thing is to feel it. And people say you've got to feel it to heal it. And it's a bit of a cliche, but the more you try and run away from it or disassociate from it, and I've got some coping skills that are not necessarily the healthiest still to this day that I continue to work on.
We all do, but that's part of it, isn't it, as human beings?
It is. But because sitting with really heavy emotion, it's exhausting, it's draining. But I had a really good psychologist at one stage, and she said to me, this well of emotion and pain and hurt that you have within you, it's like a swimming pool. And every time you sit with it and you feel it, you're draining it just that little bit more. And it will never be empty. But if you don't acknowledge that it's there, it will come up and bite you on the ass in ways that you cannot control and in ways that you will not see coming. And it has on occasion for me. Like sometimes I've had this, menopause was a beautiful, horrific time. That's a whole other podcast about how you don't, you lose all control of your emotions and your thought processes all over again. But it did again highlight to me that there was stuff I wasn't feeling. There was stuff I was too scared to acknowledge within myself. And if you don't, that shit will rip you open in ways that you can't control. So you choose to do it in a considered fashion with a professional, or the ways that I do, where I sit at home and I have my grief sessions where I let it all out. You can choose to do it that way, or it will come at you anyway. So you're not actually making it's still there. You're just developing skills to push it away. And I honestly, that's what happened to Sean. It became this, he was managing it by being super achieving and doing all this external stuff because he was so terrified of feeling what was inside. But ultimately, it never went away. And that, I see that so often now with probably more so males. I think we've done men a real disservice in terms of equipping them to manage their emotions. Yeah. As a mother of a young man who has an emotional awareness and intelligence decades ahead of most of the men that I know, I'm so proud of him for that. And I think generationally it is changing slowly. Yeah.
But you, having been through what you've experienced, has also made that more important to ensure that that cycle is broken from your perspective.
100%.
So Zach doesn't experience what Sean had to experience.
Absolutely. And it reached a stage, though, where he did say to me as a teenager, because I was so hyper-vigilant and I was so checking in on him in terms of how you feeling. And he turned to me, I remember it in the car one day, and he said, "Mum, I'm not him." Yeah. And it was like, shit, you're right. I'm putting this burden on you, and you're not him. You're not. You are your own person, and you have had a very different upbringing, and you've had very different life circumstances. So, yeah, but going back to your question, if you don't feel the pain that you have within you, and everybody has emotional pain, let's not kid ourselves. It's just the flavour. It's just the intensity of it that will come and go and vary at different stages. And it's never a competition. This is the other thing I've realised, is that my trauma is no worse or better than anybody else's. I used to think, it's not really traumatic. Like, I've got a great business, I've got a good marriage, I've got great kids, but it's not a competition. And you said it when you defined trauma. You said, if it is outside of your coping mechanisms, and everybody's coping mechanisms are different. But if you don't feel what is within you, it will incapacitate you in ways that you will not anticipate and that perhaps you may not be able to overcome. So feel it. You have to feel it.
Very powerful words of wisdom from you, Kellie. I do. And I think that's it. When people who've been through such significant trauma, whether they see it as trauma or not, like you said, and have come out the other side, we need to listen. Yeah. We need to look for, as you would have heard in other podcasts, look for the breadcrumbs. Yeah. They're there. They're always there. And that's what I love about doing this podcast, is we're getting all different types of trauma. Everyone is saying similar things.
Isn't that interesting?
Lessons and gifts in our trauma, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. There's strategies and skills, and everyone does it differently, but we all do it in our own way and make sense of it. And everyone pays it forward in a different way.
Yep.
And makes meaning that makes sense to them.
Yeah. Meaning. Yeah, that's a powerful word as well. Yeah.
Finding, re-identifying, like getting clear on who you are as a result of your trauma, getting clear on that, feeling it, acknowledging the pain, but getting really clear on your purpose. And your purpose was to make a difference, pay it forward, create a legacy and a memorial to help other people. And you've done that in bucket loads.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sean
but selfishly
so
for my own reasons as well. You know, selfishly that it's as much for me as it's been for anybody else. So it's been win-win in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone wins when we do connect at a really deep level internally to ourselves and our own needs, and we listen to that little voice inside and stop ignoring it and pushing it down. We grow and we pay it forward and make a bigger difference. And I think that's at the core of who you are, who we are as human beings, and part of what helps move us forward. So
it's wonderful.
Yeah. So you've done amazing things.
Thank you, Nat. So have you. The fact that it's sort of gone full circle from Mike Gaddy's class in 4-5G, and here we are talking about trauma and epigenetics, and
he'd be looking down on us going, oh, you girls have done okay.
Exactly. And isn't it funny how the way the world and life works? Everything, synchronicity, right? Synchronicity.
Totally agree. So, Kel, as we move to wrapping up the conversation, where can our listeners find out more about you and find you online?
Yeah, so I've different stages. I've done some health coaching with different gyms are in the area because I love helping people be their best in terms of their physical and mental well-being. So I have an Instagram page called Kellie Burns Health Coach. There's no financial connection to that for me personally. I just love posting the stuff and sharing the stuff that I feel has helped me over the years in terms of how to eat better, move better, all the things we've chatted about today. So you're welcome to follow me there. Yeah, and hopefully can connect with some people.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll put that in the show notes, and
thanks, Nat.
We'll push that out on social media, and
awesome.
And I'll probably get you on again because I'd love to get a follow-up on your back and how that's going. And
how my neuropsychologist is healing my life. Yes,
exactly.
The next chapter begins.
And look at, how you make sense of that as to what stored trauma is sending those messages and what layers of the onion peel off next.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm both apprehensive and excited. So, I'll keep you posted on that front.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I honestly feel so blessed to have connected with you again.
Me too.
Thanks, Kel.
Thanks, Nat. Bye.
Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe, and it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.